Commerce Alive Today presents
Phar-Mor. Phar-Mor started to came into existence as an affiliate of Pittsburgh-based Giant Eagle Supermarkets Inc., a $1 billion family-owned grocery chain with 50 locations in the area. In 1981, Giant Eagle Supermarkets acquired Tamercan Distributors, a privately owned grocery chain and distribution firm. Within a year, Giant Eagle Supermarkets heir David Shapira and former Tamercan Vice President Michael "Mickey" Monis established Phar-Mor Incorporated, an entry into the big box fast-growing deep discount drugs segment. The two businessmen seemed to confirm the adage that opposites attract. The charismatic Monis developed a reputation for flamboyancy in the otherwise stuffy drugstore industry. He reportedly traveled with an entourage by white limousine. On the other hand, was described as a member of Pittsburgh's establishment. Monis served as president of the new venture and Shapira as chief executive officer. Giant Eagle Supermarkets owned 50% of Phar-Mor, and real estate mogul Edward J. DeBartolo Sr. reportedly held a substantial equity interest in the new enterprise. The deep discount segment of the drugstore industry traces its history back to closed-out shops that appeared during the Great Depression. The popularity of the concept waned when prosperity returned, but saw a resurgence during the recession of the 1970s. Consumers wanted quality goods at low prices, and they were willing to forego ambience, convenience, and selection to get them. Discount druggists kept overhead very low and used specialized purchasing techniques to achieve economies that they then passed on to their bargain-hungry customers the need to buy at a cheap price and within a good product. Discounters rented older and usually cheaper retail spaces than their traditional drugstore counterparts. They saved advertising dollars by making their own signs and product displays by hand. Most of these operations were led by independent owner and managers. Purchasing techniques were key to the concept. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, deep discounters obtained merchandise strictly on deal from manufacturers, often settling for limited quantities of a product in exchange for discounts of 12 to 20% off wholesale prices overall. Buying stock on deal meant that these retailers carried a limited, often erratic merchandise mix, but customers did not seem to mind since deep discounters passed savings of 25 to 40% off suggested retail prices onto their customers. The retailers made up for their own lean margins with very high volume, often achieving 6 to 7 times more sales per square foot than their conventional counterparts. By the early 1980s, the competitive pressures brought by big box deep discounters, warehouse clubs, and other off-price concepts had begun to capture the attention of traditional retailers, including Giant Eagle Supermarkets, which launched Phar-Mor in the year 1982. Phar-Mor used many of the techniques established by deep discounters and additionally adopted a strategy that had helped make Walmart a national phenomenon: power buying, or placing the largest possible orders for merchandise in order to secure the best possible terms. Phar-Mor earned a reputation for hiring shrewd purchasing agents who were proficient at negotiating the best wholesale deals from vendors. Their high-pressure tactics sometimes strained supplier relations as well. Competition intensified dramatically during the mid-1980s as many mass marketers and independent entrepreneurs joined the deep discount segment. From 1985 to 1990, the overall number of deep discount drugstores in the United States and Canada more than doubled, from 313 to 700. Although a relative latecomer to the segment, Phar-Mor more than kept pace with the industry's rate of growth. By 1987, Phar-Mor had nearly 70 stores, and a year later it opened its 100th store. In 1990, Phar-Mor surpassed the 200-store mark, becoming the leader in the industry. As it grew, its merchandise mix expanded from prescription and over-the-counter drugs and health and beauty aids to include more general merchandise, including office equipment, sporting goods, apparel, videos, music, and frozen foods and other items. Phar-Mor needed a symbiotic relationship between power buying and rapid growth. In 1991, Phar-Mor needed an expanding base of stores to sell the huge quantities of merchandise it purchases. At the same time, the increasing number of stores has generated the growing need for vast amounts of goods purchased at the lowest possible cost. The company won financial support for this strategy from corporate partners, the investment arm of Lazard Frères and Company, when it sold the firm's 17% stake for $200 million in 1991. In July 1992, chain president Michael Monis hosted a high-profile grand opening of the 300th Phar-Mor store. While there, Monis announced a corporate goal of 340 stores by 1996. Even retail giant Sam Walton admitted that of all his competitors he feared the Phar-Mor juggernaut the most. But before the month had ended, the fears harbored by many of Phar-Mor's retail rivals evaporated in scandal. To the shock of most observers and to the dismay of Phar-Mor creditors, investors and suppliers, on July 31, CEO David Shapira accused Monis Chief Financial Officer Patrick Finn and 2 other high-ranking officials of plotting to defraud the chain of $10 million in cash and exaggerate the chain's earnings and inventories by hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of 3 years. A flurry of firings and finger-pointing ensued. Shapira fired Monis, his protege Finn, 2 other executives, and the chain's outside auditor Coopers and Lybrand. Phar-Mor subsequently accused the accounting firm of a grossly negligent, intentional or reckless failure to uncover a massive fraud perpetrated on Phar-Mor. The lawsuit, one of several scandals that tarnished the accounting firm's reputation in the late 1980s and early 1990s, sought compensatory and punitive damages. Coopers and Lybrand in turn sued CEO Shapira for not catching the fraud, as well as Monis, Finn Monis's father, and Jeffrey Wally and Stanley Charlstein. For their part, Finn and Wally confessed to the fraud but implicated Monis as the ringleader of the group. His accusers traced Monis's problems to the 1987 foundation of the World Basketball League, a professional association for players under 6 and 7 feet tall. Monis owned at least 60% of each of the 10 teams in the whole league and was therefore responsible for that fraction of each team's expenses and losses. Milton Cantor, a fellow investor in the WBL, told Plain Dealer reporter James McCarty that each of the league's games averaged a $13,000 loss. Former Phar-Mor CFO Finn, federal investigators, and even Monis's co-owners in the WBL alleged that Monis had embezzled millions to cover the league's costs and had conspired to inflate the value of Phar-Mor's inventory in order to garner executive bonuses and other financial advantages. It was characterized as being doomed from the start. Its August 1992 collapse coincided with revelations of the multi-million-dollar sham at Phar-Mor. By mid-August, when anxious vendors began detaining shipments, Phar-Mor filed for bankruptcy protection under Chapter 11. By the end of that same month, Shapira laid off over 1,000 company employees and wrote off what he hoped were the total damages of $350 million. At the same time, it became apparent that the entire deep discount drug category was in deep trouble. Aggressive pricing from conventional drug chains, supermarkets, and mass merchandisers undercut the discounters' price advantage. Overexpansion by the leading chains had saturated in all key markets. Blame was placed on strategies that had formerly been recognized as some of the keys to Phar-Mor's success: excessive inventory, oversized news stores, and straying far beyond core merchandise into such areas as computers and sporting goods. The company brought in Antonio Alvarez as interim chief financial officer and turnaround chief in August 1992. Alvarez, who prescribed efficiency, contraction, and a focus on profitable stores to cure the drug chain's ills, was promoted to president and chief operating officer that September. He quickly closed more than 1/4 of Phar-Mor's stores across America, reduced the payroll by about 20%, and negotiated with creditors to save the company $233 million. In February 1993, he was promoted to the chief executive office, vacated by David Shapira, who moved on to the chief executive office at Giant Eagle Supermarkets. Alvarez brought in David Schwartz, who had recent experience revitalizing the Smitty's SuperValue grocery chain based in Phoenix, Arizona, as president early in 1993. Phar-Mor's new management team was able to win the financial support of creditors and convince suppliers to ship merchandise, but these measures did little to reverse declining sales and low morale within the company. In January 1993, a federal grand jury indicted Michael Monis on 129 counts of fraud. He was charged with one of the biggest swindles in the history of U.S. business. The suit accused him of defrauding Phar-Mor's investors of $1.1 billion and the chain itself of $11.1 million. A hung jury forced the presiding judge to call a mistrial in June 1994. A second grand jury brought more than 100 new charges against Monis within a month, but as of January 1995 the new case had not yet come to trial. CEO Alvarez's operational reorganization continued apace with Phar-Mor's financial reorganization. By the end of 1993 the chain had closed or sold 167 of its 310 stores across America, slashed its employee rolls from over 25,000 to 9,800 and shed superfluous merchandise lines to concentrate on health and beauty aids, drugs and food in all other locations. The chain automated inventory procedures and expanded advertising and promotions to raise awareness that Phar-Mor was still in business. In January 1995, Phar-Mor submitted a financial reorganization plan that proposed taking the chain public. Under the plan, Phar-Mor's senior secured creditors would receive 85% of the chain's common stock, up to $107 million cash and $100 million in variable rate notes. Unsecured creditors would receive up to $30 million cash and 15% of the chain's common stock. With this plan, the company expected that Alvarez would be elected chair and that David Schwartz would advance from president to CEO. An alternative plan was filed in April of that year, however, under which an investor group led by drugstore magnate Robert Half would purchase 30% of Phar-Mor. Half and his associates would purchase 5 million shares of the new company's stock from creditors, as well as 2.5 million shares directly from the company. Alvarez remained committed to Phar-Mor's potential to become a strong, financially healthy company. In a press release he noted, under either plan Phar-Mor will aggressively pursue strategic new store openings. We believe it is time for the company to emerge from Chapter 11 and focus solely on building a stronger company. That was very short-lived, soon after only to be hit hard once again by competition from other large retailers such as Walmart and Target, which began opening new stores with pharmacies. Phar-Mor, unable to compete, was forced into bankruptcy for the second time in September 2001, only about 6.5 years after it had emerged from its prior 3-year-long bankruptcy. The company was delisted from the Nasdaq stock market on October 10, 2001. Phar-Mor became weaker and weaker during its last years of business. The company tried to return to its power buying concept before it had filed for bankruptcy, but to no avail. Without power buying, Phar-Mor found itself directly competing with CVS and Walgreens and lost out because of other chains' convenient locations. Phar-Mor's second bankruptcy was eventually to result in its total liquidation of all stores of the company. In July 2002, a judge in Youngstown, Ohio approved the sale of Phar-Mor Incorporated's $141 million in assets and inventory. Going out of business sales began at the pharmacy chain's remaining 73 stores in the U.S. Liquidation of all Phar-Mor's inventory was handled by the Ozer Group of Needham, Massachusetts and Hilco Merchant Resources of Northbrook, Illinois. Its Youngstown area assets were purchased by Giant Eagle Supermarkets in bankruptcy court and fading from the America's corporate landscape forever.
Power buying saves, save at Phar-Mor. Save on name brands all through the store. Phar-Mor's here, save Phar-Mor. Everyday low prices, saving Phar-Mor. Save at Phar-Mor. Diving big, saving too. That savings are to you. Power buying saves, save at Phar-Mor.
Shop the grand opening celebration at the Phar-Mor not far from you.
If you have any fond memories, please indicate it at the comments below. Thanks for watching, subscribe and like.